Welcome everybody, but especially Professor Colin Crouch will hear us. The lecture of today is appealing to voters' better natures. Is it feasible? And it is to try to have a title which also is fitting what the thesis which you put in your older book, but probably also will be prominent in your upcoming new book. Just let me introduce Next Left and you a little bit as an introductory. So this is the sixth Next Left lecture, and it's a series where we invite very well-respected professors and thinkers to give a quick lecture also here in European Parliament on the topics which matter on society and also are linked with the European policy. The Next Left project is a project of FEPS, the Foundation of European Progressive Studies, the foundation close to European social democracy. And it's trying to combine academia and also policy making in order to find also, let's say, a navigation to the challenges of modern times, and also helping us and bringing ideas on the table, which is, let's say, out of scope maybe of everyday political thinking, but of course contributing to it. So Professor Colin Crouch is a renowned political science and sociologist. You had been at the University of Warwick, of the London School of Economics, amongst other universities. And your books, let's say the well-known ones, is Post-Democracy, which is also trying to describe the structures of modern post-democratic structures, where it's less, let's say, political agitation, ideas, and concept, but more PR influence. And then this strange non-death of neoliberalism, which is also, let's say, following up this idea, this issue that in terms of neoliberalism, where people more, and well, let's say the state is going back to fulfilling its promises and taking care of the people. When people are left alone and they are put into agony, also this is opening the field for neoliberal, let's say, how we say in English, self-taking concepts of companies, or grabbing brutal capitalist concept, like probably all this, as the book is from 11, probably it's already in the upcoming 15 years since the publishing of the book, even worse. And then it's a globalization backlash, rethinking political identity, citizens and party, and also exclusion of the new politics as hatred. And I think what we want to hear from you today is appealing to voters' better natures. So what are really the concepts which can attract the voters? No? There is the big sentence of it's the economy stupid, but probably is a mixture of all this. And what we see now, this far right exploits stress, insecurity, deepening crisis sentiment. Social democratic parties and policies have lost appeal and support. And how we can gain back trust on matter of strategy, political narrative, and alliances. And I think it's perfectly fitting that you are here with us, because on the last weekend, there was the global progressive mobilization, the first big gathering of progressive leaders and politicians and thinkers in Barcelona this week, to show also that there is an alternative to the Trumpism, to the Putinism, to the Modrism, to the Chinese and all the populist right, which we also see in Europe. And it's also showing that there is not only a will, there is also political power which wants to defend real democracy, which in our sense and in the sense of Adler, it must be a social democracy, otherwise cannot be a democracy. So therefore, I think this perfectly fits. It's a great honor to have you here. And without any further delay, I will give the floor to you, but without not forgetting that we pass through the list of participation. So please sign in, and Marc will be the first one. And secondly, there is also a film crew here with us for a documentary which is called Fighting Democracy. So I think I think democracy. Sorry, but was precise. Precisely fighting for democracy. Okay. So don't be nervous. It's a good team. So, Professor.
Well, some people have actually started to say explicitly the need to fight democracy. If you look at the latest political experts of the tech billionaires in the United States, especially compared to Thiel, it is about we've got to get rid of democracy because this enables stupid people to have a say in how the world is run. Well, I'm partly talking about that today, but I really have this positive kind of thing, appealing to voters' better nature. But I've then put a question mark, is it feasible? Because I don't think it's the job of academics to tell political people what they should do. Too often we do that. You should do this. No, that's not our job. Our job is to help to understand the background of where we are and to raise questions and hopefully questions that make you think. So that's all I'm trying to do today, not giving answers. The context in which we're listing is this one of the decline, very large decline, not only of social democracy, but also of our old opponents in Christian democracy and conservatives, the decline of the standard parties, which in a way should always have been expected, because our main, well, still called the main parties, but the main parties grew out of major and sometimes very violent conflicts in the late 19th and early 20th centuries around class and around religion, monetary issues. Now, we just expect that people will go on identifying with those old conflicts. But why should they? Because the societies have changed. It was the industrial and mining working class that carried socialism. They don't exist much anymore. So we assume that because a city was an industrial city in the 1930s, we assume that the next generation and the generation after that in those same cities will vote the same way, even though they're no longer industrial cities. So why should we expect? And in a way, the political science started to notice a decline in the ability of people to identify solidly with particular parties back in the 1980s. So it's been a long, slow decline. For a long while, it didn't matter very much. People carried on voting, their families had voted, or until they stopped voting, or they changed their minds each election. It didn't seem to matter. Parties on the extreme nationalist right were around in France, elsewhere, from the 1970s, sometimes much later. They didn't. Two things made all this matter. The financial crisis of 2008 followed not long after the coronavirus crisis. These two enormous events have threatened the standard of living of all. People can no longer assume they will be richer next year than this year. They can no longer assume that their children will have as good a life as they. And so suddenly, this long, slow process of detachment from the main political parties really has started to matter in these years. And what had been going on was a gradual loss of identity with the party system by all the voters. They didn't feel attached to it through a party, so how were they attached to it? Suddenly, and fairly suddenly, an identity became political. That is always there, and that is nation, race. And people could say, well, we've got to look after our nation. That identity as a nation can always be made. For a long time, main politicians avoided doing that because of the terrible echoes of the Nazi fascist past. But now the parties are saying, no, we're going to insist on our nation and on our race. And some other definitions of identity, which all have in common a desire to make the world small. And this is paradoxical because the financial crisis and the coronavirus crisis have made our world smaller. economically. And it seems a strange response to that to say, let's make it smaller still, but that is actually a rational response. If there is less to go round, if there's less wealth, less goodies for us to share, then let's keep a lot of people out. Let's make the work smaller. Let's keep out immigrants. Let's keep out ethnic minorities. Let's stop women competing with men for jobs. Let's stop international organizations trying to tell us what we should do. So there's a kind of a negative, pessimistic view of the future leads people to want an even smaller world. And that is what we're having to find. And so automatically I ask, if that main response is a response of saying, let's get narrow, let's get smaller, are there appeals that can be made to encourage people to be optimistic and to see a better world if they act in common with others and not against them? One of the ways in which parties have managed to establish themselves and become strong is by taking up positions where their opponents will not follow them or cannot want them. That's the classic way of getting a party identity. We stand for this, our opponents can't do that. During the years of slow decline of the party identity, from the late 1980s through to this century, as parties sensed they were losing their core votes, they began to adopt an opposite strategy. And that was, we've got to get votes wherever we can find them. Our core base, our constituencies, whether these were the working class or Christians, our base is shrinking. Therefore, we must try and find voters wherever we can. So that led to the opposite strategy, and the strategy of saying, let's find a space where our opponents cannot follow us. And so the main parties still differed about taxation and the size of the welfare state, but basically they all said, well, we all want economic growth, we all want prosperity for everyone. And in a way, what happened to us all is we lost any characteristics. And then the nationalists, the xenophobes appear saying, we've got characteristics. We stand for some very clear things that you others dare not talk about. And that gave them a high profile. It doesn't attract everybody. They don't want it to attract everybody. They want some enemies. But it can attract quite a few people. And it's a strong identity that we're confronting it with very weak identities. So the question is, can we find grounds now about issues where our opponents cannot follow us, especially opponents of the far right? Centre right is more problematic. Just learned in Hungary that sometimes the centre right are the people we need to support, because there can be something worse. So what are the kinds of issues? Now, one of the things that's happened in recent years is people say there are now culture wars, that the issues and politics are cultural, and that's always been uncomfortable for social democrats, socialists, Labour, because we say, no, the real issues are material issues. The Marxists are the ones who really say this in a big way, but we say it too, that people shouldn't be worrying about a few immigrants in their town. They should be caring about their security, their health, their incomes. So we've always preferred material issues. And if we look at the kind of the cultural liberalism of the left, the fact that we tend to be more welcoming to immigrants, homosexuals, than parties on the right, is because we say that we're not really interested in these cultural things. Think about the material things. It's never been quite true, because issues are always a mix of the material and the cultural. I mean, the working class that carried the socialist, the social democratic project through most of the 20th century was not just a materially defined class, it was also cultural, because they're identified with their occupations, with their work, and with the way of life. No one identifies with being a particular decile in the income distribution. You might say we're coal miners. So there's always a mix of the cultural material, but there are ways in which we must reclaim some priority of the material issues, because that's our strongest ground. I want to raise a few questions about these. The most important material issue is climate change, the threat of biodiversity. Now, these are often defined as being cultural issues, which is partly because some of the green politicians, especially in Germany, often sort of treat the green thing as a kind of moral thing. It's about a moral way of life. But it can be for people, okay? But there's nothing more material than drought and flood and the destruction of crops by hostile climates. And this is the most material issue of all, is climate change. And so we need to find, and it's also an issue that can only be tackled through collective means. The individuals can't do anything about it. The market can't do anything about it. It requires collective action, but the kind we've always believed in. So how can we attract people to that issue? Because they were being attracted a few years ago, especially young people marching on Fridays against the threats of the climate. That all disappeared after COVID crisis. How do we revive that? And not by talking about net zero, but we talk about what sort of life are our grandchildren and our children going to have? What sort of life are young people going to have? We all care about these things, don't we? And you appeal to people to say, look, we've got to take this seriously. Net zero is an abstract tale. I know it's what governments have to do, but that's not what you should talk about. Sure, what are the ways in which we can attract people to caring again about climate change? Very interesting book on this by Jens Beckett of the Max Planck Institute in Cologne called it's translated in English now, how we solve the future. And it's about how in many ways things have gone too far. But there are still things we can do. And he tries to make these attractive things that people care about, but also things that don't hurt people too much, because it's no good doing what Macron did in France. So, well, we're going to do something about climate change. So you people in the countryside, you're going to pay massive sums to buy your diesel fuel for your car, your tractors. No, you've got to find ways that we're all going to make sacrifices, but you have to be careful about the distribution of these sacrifices. So what we've got to do is find ways of getting this issue back to the top of the agenda in a way that people are attracted by. Because if we look very interesting, the people of the far right, both in the United States and in Europe, they are hostile to action against climate change. And this can be very, very vulnerable for them. Second set of issues that are material with cultural implications is the extraordinary increase in inequality that is taking place in the advanced world. Now, ordinary people don't really have much opportunity to care about the very rich. They never see them. It's not part of their lives. They're too remote from their lives to think they can do anything about it. But social democrats and socialists, we believe in redistribution, so we do actually care about it. Now, for Europeans, there's not a lot we can do about it. The 10 richest people in the world, only one's a European. It's a French fashion person. 8 of them are American tech people, and the 10th is the Walmart heirs, also in America. Of the top 100 richest people in the world, 56% of them are in America, China, and Russia. The number actually in Europe is very small. Last count, there were 6 Germans, 5 French and Italians, 5 French, 5 Italians, and then 1 each from various other countries. So it's very difficult to do anything about the very rich, even if they're in your country, because they can solve it. But they're not in our countries. It's very difficult to touch them. What we can touch is the damage they're doing. I'm thinking now of the tech people and these issues, which are becoming live issues about the harms that are embedded in social media in particular. These recent cases in the United States where it was made clear that the tech companies were deliberately building into their algorithms things that would make young people addicted to what they're doing. So the negative effects of the technological breakthroughs, social media, the technological breakthroughs. We want social media, we want these things, but we can make an issue, surely, of the harms they do. And this links to another set of issues, because although we never want to be anti-American, we don't want to be anti any race or nation, there is now a division between Europeans and Americans over a whole range of issues, including the role of American tech. And so thanks to Donald Trump, it should now be possible to mobilize Europeans around the idea of Europe in order to protect our young generation, and also in order to build a European technological future. Europe's got very, very behind on new technology. We need to take advantage of this rupture with the United States to build a European technological sector. We're not doing it. That should be something people can care about. It's optimistic, it's forward-looking. So there's another thing that we need to do something about, and that is the decline of trade unions. Trade unions were one of the roots that linked workers to the political system. Now, I don't mean what Lenin. For Lenin, the trade unions were just a conveyor belt that brought people to the masses. He didn't really care about what trade unions did. They were striking for a wage increase. The Bolsheviks weren't interested in whether they got a wage increase. The point was to mobilize. We don't. That's not our view. Our view is that the representation of people's working lives is important, and trade unions were very important carriers of political messages to people. And this is declining massively. I mean, even in the countries like Belgium and the Scandinavian countries where trade unions remain strong, those links are becoming weaker. And the problem with many membership organizations in the 21st century, if you belong to something, it means something is extracted from your bank account painlessly every month. In the old days, the representative of the union would go around the factory on Friday and collect members' contributions. And that they could talk to him, raise issues they wanted brought up. Now, the relationship with all organizations we belong to has become very remote. And trade unions are increasingly representing a smaller and smaller part of the workforce. They represent public employees. They represent the very strongly declining industrial sector. They're not strong among the private services, except in sometimes banks and insurance, large employers. In particular, the growing numbers of jobs that young people have in very insecure sectors. These are beginning to organize themselves, but their relationships with the official trade unions are often poor. And this is because the trade unions looking after their members or their core workforce, often you can achieve security of employment, you can achieve wage increases for that poor workforce. Germans used to call it Stammbelägschaft, at the expense of a marginal worker, so information. People were outside. I mean, those of us who work in universities know this because we're among the worst offenders. Those of us who have secure jobs, we have tenure for life unless we do something terrible. And we can only do that because there's a lot of highly insecure people who get little bits of teaching here and there, a few research projects, but get no security. And it's very easy for a trade union to say, our job is to protect our core workforce. And one of the ways we can do this is by having this group outside of us. But there's no future in that, because gradually employers notice this. If we can make create more and more jobs in that marginal workforce with no rights, no trade unions, no representation, then we can have fewer people in the core workforce. So actually, it's in trade unions' interests to go after that insecure workforce as well, so they can say to employers, look, we're representing all of them. You can't dump from one group to another. But it's very difficult. In the long run, unions have to see that, but in the short term, it's much more difficult for them to do anything about it. So that is one way we can revive trade unions. Then a final issue, which is renewing the material agenda with cultural implications. That is developing prosperous cities. It's interesting, if you look at where far-right parties have their main bases of strength, they're almost never in prosperous cities. They're in former industrial cities that have no future. They're in small non-industrial towns, rural places. So, for example, nowadays, most of Lombardia in Italy is a stronghold of the far right, except for Milan. The Veneto, except for Venice. Large parts of eastern England, but not London. Austria, but not Vienna. So it often usually in the small countries, capital cities, sometimes in other very prominent cities, is where you get an optimistic future. Because these are the cities that have got progressive economies there, into the new technological employments. Their populations are educated. They see a prosperous future. They are therefore not intolerant of immigrants, because these are just more people joining us in making a prosperous city. Because it's a paradox that the cities with the biggest immigrant populations are usually the ones where the populist right makes least progress. And there's probably no city in the world as multinational as London, and it's a no-go area for right. So in a way, we need more cities of this kind. We need. It's not enough just to give compensation to cities. It's not enough to have them have warehouse employment for Amazon or social support to support their unemployed. These things do not make people believe in a future. So either as governments or as mayors of cities, on the centre left, we need to be fighting for cities to have these prosperous futures. It's not easily done, actually, because you need government resources and enormous public infrastructure is needed to create prosperity. And it's very easy for governments, if they're encouraging growth somewhere, you've got a choice of two cities. One city is already prosperous. It's already part of the new economy. You know, if you encourage a new factory to go there, you build a new tramway there, you know it will work. Or you can take this place that is a rundown old industrial city going nowhere, and you could put all the new resources there, but it's a big risk. And the city where I live, also, it's just getting more and more employment, more and more new technology activities. It's very strange. It's one of the most unequal cities in the country, and it votes to the left. The only bits with the vote to the right are parts of the old industrial working class, not seeing a future. So that in a way, a lot of this development should not have been coming to us. It should be going to places in the northeast where nothing's happening. But it's a very brave government that does that. So how is it possible to develop a strategy of multiplying the number of growth sectors without destroying the existing points of success? If we can solve that, we can also solve a lot of the immigration issue, because it's when immigrants go to rundown ex-industrial cities where there's no future that everything becomes worse. Like when they go to prosperous cities that are confident about the future, they don't create something. Obviously, immigration is at the heart of all this, and we do have to control it. We can't define the beliefs and concerns of large numbers of people, but we have to do this in a quiet way, and far better to be encouraging new points of growth rather than just stress the negative. I think one mistake that has been made in several countries was we had it in Britain as an official policy, disperse of sending immigrants to places they haven't shown us. It's all right, you're going to live here, you're going to live there. And in particular, sending them cities that already had high unemployment and no real prospects, and where the immigrants didn't know. It was a recipe for disaster. I remember there was a little small Italian town in Umbria I used to have a house. And there, the Italian government did something at one point that looked very enlightened. They said every commune must take its share of asylum seekers. Because Italy and Greece just have vast number of asylum seekers coming into them. Every city must take its share. So every town. So our little town, population of 6,000, we had 6. And 6 young black men. And they weren't allowed to work, but the social services looked after them. Some of the lids, bought them shoes and shirts, and they would sit in the middle of the town. They weren't allowed to work, so all they could do was sit in the middle of town in their brand new trainers with their mobile phones. And you could just see the hatred of them growing. This is a town that's not very prosperous. It's lost most of its employment. And you can understand why most people did not welcome those immigrants. And if they'd gone to a place where there was already settled communities who were integrated in the economy, it would have been far better. So working out how to restrict immigration without making a big issue of it, because when you make an issue of it, you start saying immigrants are a bad thing. You don't want to say that. Saying other humans are a bad thing. We've got to control it in quiet ways and ensure that where immigrants go, actually what you need is a combination of neoliberalism and socialism. You need the market to enable immigrants to go where they've got family, where they've got jobs, where they know there are sectors where their group are active. So the market tends to take immigrants to the best places for them, combined with strong social policy. Because areas that are having new influx of immigrants need special attention for education services. Need in the early years special attention to police force. They need a lot. Unfortunately, the big waves of immigration have taken place when a period where neoliberalism is dominant, and so there hasn't been the development of social policy around them. So what can we do? So here's a mixture then of, well, one final issue, the problem of young, white, working class men. These are the groups who claim they've been neglected because there's not been much discussion about them. And if we go back a few years, back to the 1980s and 90s, in most countries, there were amazing developments in education and other parts of life to integrate women far more into economic and other activities. And women were encouraged not just to see themselves targeted on characteristically female occupations, but everywhere. You should be able to go everywhere. And we see it now. We see women lawyers and judges, women physicians, women driving buses, women playing football to a high level. So that's been it's still a long way to go, but there's an enormous breakthrough there when women were told, don't just stay in you don't have to give up your feminine characteristics, but you're not limited to that. Everything's available, should be available to you. Now, the crisis of young men is being treated in exactly the opposite way. The people who are claiming to speak for them are saying you should be able to be more and more traditional male. You should have physical strength who's your main thing. And if you hit your girlfriend because of that, well, that's what you do. A very poisonous, politicized misogyny growing on the farm. And so men have been encouraged to do exactly the opposite of what women do. They're not being told, acquire the social skills that women seek to have. Learn a whole range of things that you think women's jobs. They're not being told that. And that's what they need. Their education system now needs to get young men to have social skills, see the ability to talk and react socially, not to be so silent. Because the jobs for which physical strength equips you are very small in number now. And even working in a factory, you will spend a lot of your time working on people. That classic female occupation, the typewriter, has become something we all do. And so men have got to be encouraged out of the ghetto that they put themselves into. And this is going to be hard work, specifically. It's attention, sonification. Now, so these are the areas where we can start to think that you don't have to appeal to people to make us smaller than they really are. That's actually going to hurt them. There are ways in which we must expand the world and encourage people to see expansion, collective action, doing things together with others, doing together with other countries is the only way to build a good future, not by making the world even smaller. Now, where can we find the people to whom this response who might respond to this kind of agenda? Well, I'm a sociologist, so for me, everything's about social structure. Now, there are groups who immediately come to mind, and already social democratic parties have had much more success among women than among men. There was a time when Christian democracy was very powerful, when women didn't work, but were very important in churches, that women voted to the Christian right of men. That ceased to be true now, and women are more likely to vote on the left in most countries. Public employees also are natural people who should be expected to come with us because their lives are about looking after the collective space of society. So it's a start. If we can make the right appeals, the start is there. But I want to do finally a little thought experiment with the kind of thing that economists do. That is, you imagine a society where there are two classes. There's an educated class, university or high school level education, and there's an uneducated. The educated class is more likely, I don't say for certain, but is more likely to take an expansive view of the world, to see the big picture of the world, and therefore possibly more willing to understand the need for collective action, more willing to understand internationalism. But they're prosperous. The educated are usually richer than the uneducated. So they probably don't want to spend too much taxation on the worker state. On the other side, the opposite again, it's among the uneducated, the poorly educated, earning less money, in lives that are very narrow and small, and find it very difficult to look above that. They don't understand the big world, and they feel it's threatening. But they're aware of a need for redistribution of workers. So we seem to have, looking at it in simplistic terms, this is oversimple, this whole thing. You might have parts of the educated class who are culturally liberal and materially conservative, and then parts of the uneducated, the poor who are materially on the left and culturally on the right. But in there are people of both kinds. And these are the people we need to find ways of identifying. And it's interesting how nowadays, for the first time, really, if you take social democratic parties, green parties, and socialist parties, their electorate is more educated than the majority of the voters on the right. This is a historical first. There's always been an educated middle class part of the left. Always been very good. But now the balance is shifting in that way. So it is possible for people who are relatively well off, nevertheless, to care about society and their education and their confidence about themselves, enable some of them to do that. On the other side, we should not stigmatize the more poorly educated, relatively poor people as always selfish, just looking after their little selves. A lot of them care deeply about their local communities. There's a view often that it's the educated, internationally oriented people who are the rootless cosmopolitans. Stalin used to call Jews. They're seen as the rootless cosmopolitans who don't care about the people around. There have been books written about it. But in contrast with the locally rooted people who care about the community. And that's, yeah, there are. And with that, there's an appeal can be made to groups within both of these, among the educated, highly paid, and among the poorly educated, lowly paid. There are groups who can be encouraged to see both cultural and material leftist policies. We've just got to find ways of talking to them and being explicit about what we expect them to do. And in this way, we can build the next centre-left coalitions.
Thank you so much for this not only interesting, but let's say food for thought giving, but also hope giving lecture today morning. And now I will invite also our, let's say, discussions or senior officials of the S&D groups and in which take the floor. So first reaction will come from Marc Angel, which is head of the Luxembourg delegation, but also Quaestor of the European Parliament.
So first of all, thank you, Professor Crouch, for these excellent reflections. It's indeed food of thought for us all. Andreas, thank you for inviting me. We're just back, many of us are back from Barcelona, where we were at the global Brexit mobilization, and this showed clearly that we don't want a small world, but we want a bigger world. And two things which I noticed now, there was a lot of focus on trade union. A lot of trade unionists, Esther Lynch was on a lot of panels, and other trade unionists, but also mayors, the fact of these attractive cities. And you mentioned these two factors, and this is something, when I consider this, we are starting to be on a good track. Of course, as socialists and democrats, we always try to appeal to the better angels of people. We focus on shared values. We focus on principles such as social cohesion, hope, and inclusion. And you mentioned it very well. We are for cohesion. And what's the contrary of cohesion? It's division. Yeah. And the others, they want to divide and make them, and that's through this division they build these smaller worlds. Also, cultural wars. You mentioned cultural wars, and we debated this a lot also in Barcelona. And there, especially when it comes to we're being portrayed as just taking care of women's rights and LGBTI rights, and you forget workers' rights. And it's completely not true. Yes, we care a lot about women's rights. Lina in the committee and in the group. I am chair of the LGBTI intergroup. I care a lot about LGBTI rights, but I care as much as workers' rights. And by the way, half of the workers are women. So it would be nice if half of the workers would be nice. But it's what we're thriving to. So this division, and we have to, especially this anti-gender movement, who came up with this concept of gender ideology. We just have to explain in very simple words that there is no ideology. This is just anti-discrimination. We don't want discrimination. We want discrimination of women. We do not want discrimination of education, and we do not want discrimination of people who don't have higher education. We want equality with this. I think this is something important. What the far right also has as an advantage in dividing people, as you said, and making this world smaller, they can come up with very quick deliverables. What do I call a quick deliverable? For example, Meloni, when she decided that birth certificates of children who have two mothers, the non-biological mother is erased. You don't need any budget for that.
No.
You don't need budget for these things. If you had abortion rights, you don't need budget for this. And you made it a subject during the electoral campaign. And then first thing, well, at least they deliver. And I've heard a lot of people who are totally not pro-Trump, but often you hear this sentence, well, he does what he says. But anyways, now he says everything different every half an hour. But in the beginning, this is something
So much, yes, some of it.
so this quick deliverables is something where also I think we should find answers. The Austrians in Vienna, in the government, they found an answer, like a renting cap would be a quick deliverable too. So we have to work on these quick deliverables. Then something what I found very interesting was when you said that we lost a bit. You know, you explained very well how we lost the core voters, etc., and we lost the characteristics of these core voters. And this happens. I'm in the business for 30 years now, 40 years now, and in Luxembourg, my party is called Luxembourg Socialist Workers' Party. And at a certain moment in the 90s, in this early 2000s, I also said, because we were always confronted, oh, you don't have any any worker in the parliament anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was like, let's get rid of that A in the name, etc. But now, much later, I realized this is our basis, and the A is not only the worker, but it's people who get up every morning and who work, and who can be an employee, can be a public employee, etc. It can be whoever, even a self-employed is in one sense a worker, and a carpenter is a worker. We all do work. And I think in the changing, in the world of work, which is doing this algorithmic management, AI, these changes, we can find back these characteristics and says, we are still, you need us together with the trade unions to protect work, to protect the people who work and against algorithmic management, and to protect them against the tech brothers of the US who attack our democracy and who attack I mean, what they want to do is to destroy our digital services. They don't want any regulation. And the anti-gender movement, all this is all about free. They say that we are forbidding free speech. So this whole movement they created is to destroy regulation, and they don't want to regulate, and we have to take remark really. And the last remark I want to do is, I was very happy that you mentioned climate change as one of the most important issues in the beginning. And here again, in 2019, when the Green Deal came out, this was our big growth strategy. Everybody did the Green Deal. I remember Frans Timmermans couldn't do a press conference without Ursula von der Leyen next to him, because she wanted this was the big thing. And then there was a narrative build-up which destroyed this whole, and maybe also the word green wasn't the right thing. And I remember that Frans Timmermans came to our group a few months ago, and he said, maybe we did a mistake. I should have called it the Industrial Deal, or I should have called it another deal. Now we could call it the Independence, the Freedom Deal. This is often mentioned in Barcelona, the Freedom Deal, getting us free from fossil energies, etc. So we have to give back a positive narrative to this Green Deal, and we should have reacted earlier. And the trade unions here play an important role, and I follow very much industrial law, and they had the right narrative, but I think the narrative didn't go down to the workers in the factory.
Yeah.
It was here in Brussels. It was maybe in the national boards of the trade unions, but we were not able to bring it down. And I think there we have to learn also to speak in easier language, not use because often people have the feeling that we are making fun, that we treat them as stupid because they don't understand us, but we speak a language they don't understand, and that's a big problem too. Having said that, I think you gave us a lot of food for thought, and I think we will have a very good discussion. I can stay a little bit longer, but then I have to go to a meeting with our colleague, our comrade, Raphael Glucksmann, who has this mission on social democracy in Europe. And since I'm from a mini delegation, I have one person that's in the delegation. I cannot send somebody else, so you would have to excuse me. Anyway, but thank you so much for this, and it's also good to see that so many other colleagues are here, also from civil society, from trade unions, from academia, as we need to communicate to each other, learn from each other. And I think the job of academia is also to tell us what to do, not only to make us think, but sometimes civil society and academia could pick us a bit and tell us, or at least tell us you're going in the wrong direction. And I think we learned a lot today, so thank you very much. And again, Andy and the Renner-Institut also for organizing this meeting.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you for putting also the question of how to frame issues which have double or triple results also to arrive maybe there. And as you spoke about academia, it's the best swap to our colleague Lina Gálvez Munoz. She's not only a member of the European Parliament, but also vice president of FEPS and the president of the chair of the Scientific Council. So also in the Parliament, we have people with scientific background in our group. So Lina, please.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you very much also for the Renner-Institut on obviously FEPS for inviting, and thank you very much, Professor Crouch, for being here with us at the European Parliament. For me, I have to say it's an honor. I'm a professor of economic history and economic institutions. I've been in business, as Marc was saying, only for 8 years. I've spent all my life in academia, and I'm also, moving for a more progressive world, more from ideas and scientific contributions, more than institutional politics. But here I am. So sorry for being late, but I was discussing with another chair about the title of one non-initiative report. So that was what I was doing. So I was late, but these are things we are doing also here. And so a problem of competence. I don't think that's the right word in English, but never mind. I think you can understand. So I'm really very, very happy. I've studied your work. I have taught about it as being part of an economics department. So I was just smiling when you were saying, let's do these very simplistic things that economists do, this contrafactual. So I was like smiling to myself, because yeah, that's how they look to the world, and this is part of the problem we have now. I have to say, because they got too much power, their vision got too much power. And this is a part of the problem. As Andreas has said, I'm the chair of the FAM committee, so it's the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee. I'm a feminist scholar myself. So you mentioned, at least the part I hear you were mentioning about this insecurity, especially young men and more sort of working classes are having regarding all the policies we have done regarding gender. Marc has mentioned also this anti-gender movement. I think we are, for us, probably it is more clear or easier to look to this kind of hard anti-gender than to look to our soft anti-gender that it is inside the left. The progressive movement, because there is a part of us that it is buying in a way this anti-wokeism idea, and which it is buying the framework of the string right in a way, or this, you mentioned retail policies. When they talk sometimes, our colleagues, about retail policies, they are including gender equality policies. And sorry to say, but at the European Union, I think if we include UK, is even bigger. We are 10 more million women, 10 more million. So we are not any retail. We are the majority of the society. So no retail there. And this idea that this is something that is just a partial policy. No, excuse me. If you really want a democracy, if you really want an economy that works for all, you really need to include, the majority of the population. And Marc was saying equal work. No, we work more, because if you include unpaid work, which is not normally included, it is in some countries is from 1 hour per day to 5 hours. So why we have less time to be creative, to be to take care of our bodies in gyms and all these sort of things, because we have less time. Virginia Woolf was saying that I know. It's like Virginia was a rule of our own, but now probably it is also a question of time of our own, because we don't have that much time. But we are buying in a way. I was discussing all the time with colleagues everywhere, and from progressive side say that they are buying this idea that we went too far. We are not tackling any more sort of material class inequalities. Say, well, these are not confrontational. This we are buying the string right framework and look into that instead of looking what neoliberalism has done to us. Capitalism, but just to concentrate on this period of capitalism, this neoliberal capitalism of financialization, and that it is generating so much inequalities that are not compatible with a real democracy, because they are accumulating so much power, and they are kind of diverting us to look to what we have to look at. And they are saying, you are pushing much attention on gender and LGBTQ class, and instead of real class inequalities, and we are buying that. Or now, I don't know if in your countries, but at least in my country, is this idea that we have a generational confrontation. That we more adult people live much better than our younger generations. And it is a way also to focus on the wrong place, because it will be young people that are really living very well, because they are inheriting a lot of money, they are living everywhere, they can buy houses, and there is huge amount of them that are not. So again, not all young people are in the same situation, while in the media, it is presented all the time, sort of the baby boom generation is the generation to blame, and then young generations are not having. And if I compare, I'm a baby boomer, because in international terms, I will be an generation X. But since I'm Spanish and we were a bit late on the baby boom, I'm still a baby boomer. So for Spain, a baby boomer, internationally, I'm not. But yeah, I was born in '69, and but this idea again, it is making us to confront and to break really how we are. We really need to look to the problems, obviously. Not confronting the different inequalities, but taking all of them in an intersectional way into consideration. So sometimes I like to remind Nancy Fraser 3R. It is women. It's about redistribution. It's about recognition. It's about representation, because we also want to be in power, of course, in the same way, or probably to make this different. But my impression is that we are buying, and well, not my impression, my fear is that we are buying this framework of the extreme right. Even if we are trying to combat that framework, we are at the same time trying kind of buying that framework, and we are playing for them if we do that, because I think they are attacking feminism, because feminism is the most radical democratic movement all over the 20th century and what we have been doing over the 20th century. So if you want to empty democracy, if you want to destroy democracy, you do well if you go against feminism. So I'm of course combating extreme right, anti-gender, anti-democratic movement, austerity, everything they bring on, xenophobic, new colonialism or whatever. But I'm also concerned combating this kind of soft, anti-gender that it is going on within the progressive world. So sorry if I, but I wanted to raise that